Well, are fair or unfair? That's what we want to discuss tonight as we consider the question, is the British housewife the worst cook in the world? A word from our audience here. We have many points we want to cover on this. And first of all, I'm going to turn to a man who felt so strongly about this when we trailed it last night that he sent a telegram saying could he come on the Friday discussion show backed by international culinary experience and speak in praise of one cook who is English and a housewife, my wife, Willie Fisher. Well, we all know author and journalist and economist. Willie, why did you feel so strongly about this?
Well, Eamonn, let me first establish my credentials. As you know, I'm Viennese, and it's often been said, and I think rightly, that whereas other people eat to live, the Viennese live to eat, you know, and you can see it on my side as well. But I would like, since you posed the comparison and say that the British housewife is maybe the worst in the world, which I strongly deny, you have to look at the others first. And with all due respect to Madame Prunier, who offers the most delicious meals, you know, the average French housewife is not so good at that. The very few people who have a chance of being invited to a French home are being hit by really by a veritable tornado of garlic. And garlic, of course, kills all the other tastes. And even if you kiss, kiss the hostess, and believe me, in my younger days, I've kissed many French hostesses. You get the garlic with you. Now,
that is your wife sitting beside you, is it? That is your wife beside you.
Yes, my wife.
Why is she so great that made you send this telegram? What does she do for you in the way of cooking?
And she has really taken an interest in cooking, you know, as many English women do. And from the very beginning, she has green fingers as far as cooking are concerned. With some people, everything grows. You know, I want to say again that most people who have English wives, like Mr. Price, say she's a good cook, and dear Miss Rayner, who's English, says she's a good cook. So therefore, everybody is out of step except our little Joan, you know.
Well, what is it that your wife cooks so well that makes you so?
My wife really has taught herself to cook almost everything. She can really cook a perfect Viennese meal, which is not easy. And she can make the Viennese soufflés, which are entirely different from the English one. She can cook the Wiener Schnitzel, which are delightful. She can switch to French cooking, and her range of soul, from Normand to whatever it is, are almost as great as those at Madame Prunier's.
Tell me, Mrs. Fisher, sitting beside your husband, who's not exactly disappearing, do you feel that you're proud of your cooking as he grows before your very eyes?
Yes, I'm quite proud of my cooking, but I don't want him to grow before my... Fortunately, I don't get that.
This is an example. If I can answer your question again.
Is she a good cook in your eyes?
There's a point there, a very real point. You said, is there any malnutrition in Great Britain in general? Are we well fed? Well, there is. The most serious problem of malnutrition, dare I say it, amongst these people is obesity. Now, obesity is partly caused by good cooking. After all, we like to make the foods attractive, at least the three good cooks here do, and therefore people eat more. Now, I've often suggested we ought to have a new degree in our college called a BSc, a Bachelor of Spoilage Cookery. A lot of people will be able to take their exam without having attended the course, yes. I'm sure, and make the food less attractive. You see, the more you teach people to cook good dishes...
But how did you use the word malnutrition in that connection?
Well, malnutrition just means wrong feeding.
So if you eat it doesn't mean lack of food.
No, undernutrition is lacking something. You would agree, wouldn't you, Claire?
Well,
malnutrition is obesity.
Yes, but no, Dr. Bender, you're assuming...
I weigh 20 stone, and I'm as fit as a fiddle, you know?
Dr. Bender, you're assuming that everyone wants a very long life. Me, I don't know that there's not a lot to be said for the short and merry one. I mean, I'm having a lovely time.
We'll talk to you again in a few years' time.
Yes,
exactly.
Look, sitting next to Willie, by the way, congratulations, is the man who was at Olympia today made Chef of the Year. Briefly, do you think the accusations we're hurling at the British housewife is justified, Mr. Jackman?
The British housewife is not so bad. It does a good meal.
Not so bad. Right behind you is a British housewife, Margaret Powell. Do you feel in all conscience, Margaret, that you're doing the right thing by your Albert?
I most certainly do. I think that you can't beat the British housewife as a cook if she gets the right food. I defy the best cook in the world to make a bit of ribs taste like a Scotch sirloin. And when you think of the sort of beef you get nowadays that looks as though they had to kill it to save its life, otherwise it would have died of anemia. And then like a painter or a sculptor. You want the right audience. If you've got a husband that's always saying to you he never forgets his mother's cooking, or after you've spent hours doing it says, oh yes, it was all right, but I'd just as soon have it the old way, what are you going to do? I mean, there's absolutely no incentive to cook, is there at all? It's like casting pearls before swine.
Who teaches the housewife
But
how
is this,
to
are
cook?
you saying then, Margaret, in fact, that we men just don't appreciate good cooking
Well, of
anyway?
course you don't. There's very few things you do appreciate come to that.
For instance?
And certainly
No.
you don't. You can stick anything in front of a man. You take my husband, you make a lovely steak and kidney pudding. He says, I don't like steak and kidney pudding, it looks messy on your plate.
Margaret.
Well, what are you to do?
Wasn't the woman who taught him his eating habits a British housewife too?
Yes.
No, I don't really think that men do appreciate us. And in any case, when you think that the British housewife cooking is only one of the things she has to do, she has to be a good laundress, a good shopper, a good domestic servant, she has to be everything. No, I strongly disagree.
But Claire
I think
just
given
said-
the right food, we can cook as well as anybody in the world.
All right, we'll
You
pursue
do
that
your own
further.
shopping.
But you just said there, Claire, wasn't the woman who fed him a British? In
Yeah.
other words, is it not a fact that every British husband feels that mother cooks better than the wife? Is this not a little strange and true?
Oh, well, you know, they still love to back to the nursery
Oh,
thing, you
you're
know.
so
it's,
right.
it's like this passion for rice pudding and milky things. It's
Yeah.
sort of
It depends on your
almost back
mother,
to
of
the
course.
womb.
Sometimes you say,
Yeah.
thank goodness I got away from it.
So, right. And don't forget, the mother had the upper hand. She beat the hell out of them
If
and
you
make
didn't
them
eat
eat
it,
it.
yeah.
You know, you eat that. Oh, poor
Well, you
little
can't
kids.
say to a grown man, no, you don't get any pudding or whatever, you know, if you don't
Exactly.
eat it all up.
No.
Yeah, but when the women cook, are they cooking for the fun of cooking for themselves, or are they cooking for the man who's
Oh, the
coming
audience.
home?
No, I think, as Margaret said, you must have an audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife will often say it was worth several hours' work because everybody enjoyed it. You know, you spend hours and hours of working, don't you, in preparing it, and you set the table and so forth, and in half an hour the whole lot's gone. There's a dirty mess of dirty plates left.
I've got a horrid feeling a lot of people cook, though. A lot of women cook not because they enjoy it or
Yes.
because they see it as an art form,
You're
because
right.
it's one of those dreary jobs that have got to be got through, like scrubbing
But
the floor.
Well, that's
when
if
it's
regular
joy-
cooking, though, isn't
when
it?
it's
We're all
joy,
regular
it's
No.
exciting.
Don't you have special occasions? You can't really do your artistic cooking every 3 times a day, every day in the
No.
week.
No.
So your ordinary
plan it.
cooking is
Not
an ordinary
unless you
meal.
pay
You know, open a
like
can of
tens.
beans if you like.
Yeah, well,
But
I don't
every now and
plenty of
again,
cans of beans,
every
my
now and
kids
again,
don't.
you cook in
Let me-
a
where are
special
our
way.
friends from British Road Services, lorry drivers who drive all around? Some of them here in the second and third row. There, just now you fellas do a lot of driving. You eat a lot in cafes all around the place. Am I right in saying that if some of these cafes you go to really turned in some delicious Vincent Price-wise delicacies, they'd go out of business?
No, it's bad grub, honestly, up and down the road. And it's nice to get home.
But if they
to the
tried
wife.
to be fancy, would you go in still and eat there?
You probably couldn't afford it.
But you know, when I drive to work, I always stop at a calf, as you call them, and there's one called Delia, and Delia serves 800 meals a day, and on a stove that big, and the food is excellent. It really is. Because mind you, I go very early in the morning; it may deteriorate, but she's good.
Well, I'm not going to say too much about them because I might get slung out of them.
You won't ever get in.
I've got to eat.
Well, then whatever.
Before you start, this young lady said about you don't appreciate your wife's cooking. I know. I live and sleep all over the country, and I have to put up with certain bears and certain grub, and it's nice to get home to my wife's cooking.
I hope you tell her
That's
that.
very good.
Well, she
That's
probably
very
is.
sweet.
Is there any man here who is prepared to say that he thinks the British housewife is a rotten cook?
Howard. There's one.
There's one raising
There's
his
a
finger.
splendid chap there.
Let's go up 1, 2, 3, 4 rows back. A man who's been on television himself cooking.
Yeah, well, I'm a professional cook, as you probably know, Eamonn. But I think we've missed 2 very important points in this discussion. Firstly, the war, 2 wars, and secondly, it's an insular country. Now, if you live on the continent, you are a French or a German national, Italian, the opportunity of crossing the border and seeing another country's cooking is so easy. They live this sort of life where they're continually travelling around. That's point number 1. Point number 2, I'll make very briefly, is that the average British housewife, who is now reaching the age where she should be a good cook, was brought up in wartime restrictions. She didn't see good food. Now, as a little boy, I can remember working in my father's butcher shop, having at the back a little piece of leg of beef, which looks like a fillet. Now, this young housewife came in and she said, "Oh, I'd like a piece of that fillet." I said, "Well, it's not a fillet, madam." Now, this is something that any old, traditional English housewife would know the difference. She insisted that was a fillet. Now, I knew it was leg of beef, but I said, "All right, if you want it," I told her what it was. She insisted on having it. She went out as happy as can be because she thought she had a fillet steak. She didn't know the difference. And this is how they've grown up since the war, not knowing the difference between good food and bad food, and now they're accepting anything as a convenience food. And this is my point.
All right, let me move to another aspect of this, quite apart from the old man, who are all either well-fed or terrified. I don't know which, but what about the kids? We read a lot about how we feed our children, and that we tend to feed them to shut them up, and that we tend to overfeed them. We read a lot of stuff about this. Mrs. Greenwood in the front row there, what views have you got on how we feed our children?
I think we're lazy. I think we're being educated, rather as David has just said, towards using too much packet food, too much tin food, and too much frozen food. And we were brought up during the war. We didn't know what it was like to have the good food that our parents knew. And we have never, at least very few of us, have ever had the opportunity of being properly educated towards eating properly. And I think we're now, everything's a package deal for the modern housewife, and it's quick because she's working to open a packet, add water, and hey presto, you've got an instant meal.
Do you think this is the baleful influence, Vincent, of your country?
Coming, yes.
You know, where the wife leaves the note and doesn't say your supper's in the oven, it's in the fridge.
You know what my wife leaves the note and says, "Honey, cook dinner." She does. I'm the cook in my house. I have an 8-year-old daughter, though, and I'm trying to teach her to like things, you know. And we were in France this summer, and she ate marvelous food, reluctantly, I might add. And
with garlic?
Yes, with garlic, but naturally. I mean, we use garlic in everything but the ice cream.
I weed my children on garlic, madam.
Of course, and it's very good for worms.
They leave home early.
You mean you don't like the taste of the food itself? You only like what you put on it, like garlic?
No, the garlic brings it out.
It brings it out.
Well,
It's
doesn't that little bit of brown sauce we saw at the beginning bring it out?
That drowns.
Isn't it nutritional?
No, I always
garlic?
wonder, when you put all these things onto food, don't you like the taste of the food?
Yes, but they enhance the taste.
But
of
if you're tempting your young children to become gourmets,
Yes.
are you not terrified of them growing fat and big?
No,
and heavy
no,
before they
because
even
gourmet food does not mean necessarily fattening.
You don't have to eat too much.
Oh,
You often
no,
do.
you don't have
The
to eat
greater
too
the love of
much
food, the more
either.
you're going to eat.
That's right.
Do you think the kids are overfed as well as the adults?
Well, we've got a big problem. There are some underfed and some overfed. I mean,
Yes.
childhood obesity becomes adult obesity, and children are eating too much sugar and so forth. But we have children who are not getting enough because they're living on lemonade, in the States in particular, French fries, Coca-Cola,
That's right.
hamburgers,
That's right.
standard meal.
But I mean, how do you know when a child of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 is overfed? Just by looking fat? Or
Overfed
what?
is looking fat, yes.
Yeah.
And
And when the
underfed
teeth
might be
fall
looking
out.
thin.
But what do? You can't put a child on a diet. I mean, can't say
You can,
Oh,
you
yes,
can.
yes.
You can.
Yes?
It starts off with mother and father in babyhood. They
I've
are
been
trying to
saying
see a nice fat baby. And the more food they can push in, and the bigger the baby grows, they say how proud they are. Our child grew 6 ounces. Oh, mine grew 8 ounces
Yes,
this week.
exactly. That's
And this is what we have to reverse. And a nice fat baby, they think, is a healthy baby. Then at school age, of course, you're a bit sorry because the nice fat child now can't take part in games and so forth. But that's where the damage has already been done. Now that child has to be slimmed down. It's not easy.
This point you make about dieting children. Look, my kids are so sort of brainwashed about protein is good for you and carbohydrates are not, that when a fly landed on something on a picnic, the kid said, "Doesn't matter, Mummy, it's all protein." You know, really, you can be very careful with children and still make them into gourmets.
Yes.
But do you think that this consciousness that certainly has swept Britain and has swept your country of people watching their figures, trying to be slim, being told by experts like you that we're obese and so on, that we're going to get to the stage where, you know, a 6-foot docker will come home to mum and say, "Put away the sausages and mash, I want a green salad"?
This is one of the problems, actually. I was talking to Claire about this before, that there are several cases coming up of young people who are grossly underweight because they've deliberately tried to slim in a very foolish way by cutting out a lot of their food and finished up with a shortage of food.
Quite seriously, I'm on a teenage magazine and...
By the number of children who've been brought up by parents who are so intent on them not growing fat, have now got the greatest difficulty in eating proper food and get stomach complaints and all sorts of things.
Yes.
I think if children are left to eat normally and reasonably, they grow up quite healthy.
I get a lot of letters, Eamonn, on a teenage magazine that I work for that worry me a great deal. Kids will say, "What's the matter with me? I'm 5'5" and I weigh 7 stone. Help me to get thin." It's really pathetic.
Well, it's part of the modern fashion trend, isn't it?
Yes, and it's
Let
To be
very
very
alarming.
thin
Let me
and
just
look
ask
slightly
all of you, and you haven't criticised the British housewife, but what words of encouragement would you offer to the British housewife now who's concerned about her cooking? All of you, rather briefly.
Experiment.
Experiment,
Yes,
absolutely.
be bold.
Yes, be
Try.
The
bold.
worst that can happen is
See
it'll be a
when you
disaster.
go abroad, because it's a new factor you have. A lot of people who used not to go abroad, who go abroad of all classes.
But Madame Prunier,
And
doesn't
then
that
they
mean...
see new things and try what you have seen and what you have liked abroad, try it on you.
You can
But what
always get
about-
another husband.
But Madame Prunier, what about those awful pretentious people? You go to a dinner party and she says, I've got this lovely little recipe I picked up in Afghanistan when we were there last summer, and it turns out to be another yucky stew, you know.
Yak stew is very good.
No, yucky. I mean, that's the other side of it.
No, may I object to
it's
saying
ridiculous.
experiment? Why shouldn't they learn first? Because I asked before, where does the housewife learn how to cook? And she doesn't really. She might pick up a little from her mother, and she might not. She might not be taught anything. And she might go to school and do domestic science.
No, every magazine, every newspaper in the world today has marvelous recipes.
Yes, but you know she
I
doesn't
was
use
never
them. People
taught.
collect recipes by the thousand.
but not in the
I mean, cookery
newspaper,
books sell
yeah.
literally by the million
Yeah.
and are not used. In all the surveys that have been carried out, people have been asked, do you collect cookery books? Yes, and very large numbers are sold. Do you use them? Now, in a survey we carried out a couple of years ago from Queen Elizabeth College, about 20% had tried out a cake recipe, and about 3 or 4% had tried out a meat recipe.
Let me just leave it at that, because I've got to leave for time, but I just don't believe that there's nobody who doesn't believe that the British housewife is as good as she says. Now, I'm not saying I disagree with you at all, but I'm sure the phones are hopping here, so we're going to have a little competition. If some of you looking in really believe that you've had the greatest disaster of all time, that you house the worst cook in the world, be it your wife, your mum, or your girlfriend, send us a letter. Tell us about the great disaster, and we'll see who gives us the best or the worst, if we get any letters at all. Otherwise, I'm delighted. Congratulations, British Housewives. Not a blemish. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us.